name is Ian, the part-time Dungeon Master. Welcome back to D20 Sundays. So, I know I normally don't do one on this week, and that it's kind of the off week where I kind of relax and plan for other videos and so on. But I figured I'd bring something to your attention and talk about for a moment, considering this whole quarantine thing is going on. I can't really say the virus's name and all that because YouTube gets all up in a tizzy, and while I'm not monetized, they can punish me in other ways. So let's not worry about the name of the virus or the fact that the quarantine is going on. Let's worry about the fact of how this can affect you as a family. You see, your kids are not at school, and if you're like me, you like spending time with your kids, but at the same time you kind of need to work, and you need your kids to do their schoolwork at the same time. But if your kids are struggling with their schoolwork, there's a way that you can use Dungeons and Dragons to essentially help them with their schoolwork and make it fun at the same time. You see, I've been doing this with my son a little over a year now, and it's worked well with him. And while I'm not a full-time parent, unfortunately, due to distance, with my son living on the other side of the country, I want to be there with him. But when I do have him, I focus on using Dungeons and Dragons as a teaching tool. It already does basic math, adding, subtracting, sometimes multiplication, sometimes division, based upon different things, but you get the gist. So the basic math is already covered. But you're probably wondering, what about the other parts that they need to learn about in school, such as reading and writing, or maybe sight words that they have to memorize, such as vocabulary words? Well, this is how you can use them. You see, in Dungeons and Dragons, the mechanics of how something works is purely up to you as the Dungeon Master. So what I did for my son's sight words... Water. What I did for my son's sight words is I made them into essentially the magic words in order to open a door in a dungeon. He had to use the correct magic word that fit into the sentence or into the paragraphs and use that as the key to open the door. So essentially I'd give him a few sentences that have like a word or two blanked out, and I would say, you have to find the magic words. They're somewhere in this room. And when you find them, you have to put them in the correct place, and then you'll be able to open the door. And it worked. He enjoyed looking for those magic words and learning what they meant, even though they were just his vocabulary words. He learned these words. He learned to use them in proper sentences, and he enjoyed doing it. So, that's one thing you can do. You can turn their vocabulary or their sight words, or however you need it, into the magic words that are needed to open something. And you can pull it straight from his homework without them really even noticing. Well, they might notice eventually, but it took Aiden a while before he noticed that I was doing it. Next is fractions. I used fractions as well, because Aiden is starting to get into fractions, and it can be kind of annoying. I know it's annoying for me sometimes dealing with fractions. So, what I did was, I made essentially a small little set that's essentially pressure plates. They represent certain amounts, and he has to figure out which amount equals what fraction. And then he had to, fill up the corresponding jug to represent that fraction. So, I remember the one that I used on him to begin with was essentially, it was 3 jugs. Each one needed to be filled up to a different amount. The first jug had to be filled up to 2/3. The second one had to be filled up to 1/4, and the last one had to be filled up halfway. I made sure there were different fractions, and he had to figure out which fraction number, or which fraction represented, the jug, and then fill it to the corresponding amount. And it helped. It was a little complicated for him, but he got it, and he got it without a lot of my help. I had very little help from me, which made me rather proud of him, because now he's doing his homework without really realizing it, and he's enjoying the fact that he's doing his homework. So, there you go. There you have your basic homework as far as math and reading. Now, there are other things that you can do in order to help teach your kids other parts of schoolwork, but you're going to have to figure that out on your own, unfortunately, because I haven't really figured that part out myself. But Dungeons & Dragons does help teach those skills purely based on how you build the adventures. And considering how D&D works, you're building all the adventures. You can build them however you want. And it doesn't just have to be a mindless hack and slash. It can be actually something fun and definitive that has a lot of value. I'm sure you get what I mean. So, with that, please do consider during this quarantine time of using Dungeons and Dragons and good old D20 as far as teaching your kids some basic math, some basic reading skills, and some basic problem solving. And if you have more than one kid, which I only have my one, but if you have more than one kid, you can apply it to all of them and help all of them get better at each subject. Anyways, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Laters.